celebrant Amanda Lutfi.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Just as Planned TV and podcast. My name is Amanda Lutfi. I'm from Marry Me Amanda, and I'm one of your hosts of this podcast this season. And today I am absolutely thrilled to have Sasha Clark from Ceremonies by Sasha joining me. I've known Sasha as a celebrant for quite a few years, and I'm really excited to chat to her about some cool stuff that you can include in your ceremony. But look, to start with, Sasha's a marriage celebrant. She is a mum, she's a wife, she's a lover of coffee, red wine, and bubbles, all the good stuff. And after decades of working in Fortune 500 companies managing marketing teams, she turned her focus and her heart towards weddings. So Sasha creates elegantly relaxed ceremonies across Brisbane and the Gold Coast, and she's really known for working with her couples to include small touches that really create a memorable and a personal experience for the couple and their guests. I can't wait to hear more. So welcome to the show, Sasha.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. It's actually we do have chats very often. So here we are having a chat on camera. So it's a little bit different. But
yeah,
we'll
slightly different to normal.
But look, tell us about, you've got a really interesting journey to being a celebrant. I know you started your celebrancy career in the UK. So tell us a little bit about, how do you go from being a marketing manager in a big company to being a marriage celebrant? What happened there?
What happened there was, so I was in marketing for 2 decades, and for long and short of it, I burnt out. It had come to a point where I just wanted to do something different, and it fortuitously, I suppose, coincided with COVID. So if you can imagine, I had stepped out of corporate, and sort of almost at the same time as stepping out of corporate and deciding to go freelance. And I wanted to do what all the millennials were doing and have a hyphenated portfolio career, as it were. So I was like, well, what do I want my hyphens to be? And it was the second, we'd just come out of the back end of the second lockdown. So it was midwinter. It was freezing cold. The kids had gone back to school, but only part-time, so they had reduced hours. So I would drop the kids off to school, and then I would go for a freezing cold walk around the fields that were in our local area. So if you can imagine, I'm all rugged up, freezing my butt off, walking around and I was literally thinking to myself, well, what do I want to do when I grow up? Like, what do I enjoy doing? I know I don't want to go back into corporate. And as I was walking around, I was sort of listing the things off that I wanted. I wanted something creative. I wanted to feel like I was helping people. I wanted to make sure I could sort of tap into that problem solving piece, which I was always recognized for in my corporate roles. And I wanted to do something that made me feel really good, like I was actually contributing something to a broader society from a softer impact point of view. And as I was walking around and trying not to fall over because it was all frosty, I thought, oh my God, celebrant. I was married on the beach by a celebrant in Byron Bay. It was magical. It was exactly what we wanted our day to be, nice, small, intimate. And I was like, I could be a celebrant. And I literally went, oh my God. Like, I had this epiphany during COVID.
Yes.
Went home and I signed up for the course. So I qualified in the UK over COVID. Sadly, then when I started to do my first ceremonies, which was a bit unusual because we had to have full mask, and then you had to have the visor, and we had massive restrictions on number of people and all that sort of stuff. But then I caught COVID. So yeah. So then over that time, we decided, you know what, we're too far away from our family. So the values of our little family dynamic changed a little bit, and we were like, we need to be on the other side of the world now. So we packed up and moved back to Australia.
Wow. And I think going through COVID as a family and lockdown, you guys, it was a different experience, I think, to a lot of us had. Especially I was in Queensland, so it wasn't as bad as Victoria in terms of lockdown and all of that as well. But I can only imagine that must have been a huge call for the family after a period of time in the UK. How long were you there?
We were there for 16 years, so both my kids are
Wow.
English. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I say 16 years, 2 kids, a house, and 2 cats.
And then you came home. Now here you are
Then
on the
we
Gold
came home.
Coast.
Yep, on the sunny Gold Coast. I am questioning at the moment because it's so bloody hot.
It's
With
terrible. It's terrible.
Do you know what? I'd forgotten how hot it gets. I did a wedding the
Mm.
other day, and I mean, it was inside, thank goodness, but the poor groom was absolutely sweltering, and I said to him, "Look, mate, you don't have to wear," because he was wearing a jacket, bless him. I said, "You don't have to wear the jacket. If you're not comfortable, just take it off. This is about being comfortable. It's your day." And he was
Mm.
like, "Oh, Yuki wants me to wear it." And I was like, "Okay, if it's about making sure that she's happy and you're happy to be sweltering, that's fine." I said, "I'll just
All
talk
right.
faster. It's fine."
And I think they're the things we have to do, right? If it's as a celebrant, if it's stinking hot, especially if you've got elderly guests, there's all these things you really need to take into account. It's yeah, the humidity is killing us all at the moment, but I'm hopeful that a cooler change is on the way. But look, tell
Oh,
us
yeah.
about weddings in the UK. I know it's really different to marrying people in Australia, obviously different laws, all of that stuff. But tell us about weddings in the UK. How does it work? Did you have to restudy? How does that all work?
Yeah. So in the UK, in England specifically at the moment, they don't recognise civil celebrants as registrars. So we couldn't
Oh,
actually do the legal marriage. What we did was the wedding ceremony. So we did the celebration part. So the personal story. The messaging and the storytelling about marriage, many ceremonies and rituals, whereas when we decided to move back and I'd already qualified in the UK, I had to requalify for Australia so that
mm,
I could legally marry people
mm,
in Australia. So that's the main difference. But what's interesting and what sort of was a bit of I suppose, a bump for me when I came back, I was surprised at how little mini ceremonies and rituals there were in Australian weddings,
mm,
particularly versus the UK. Um, the actual ceremony itself, in terms of the wedding, not the marriage. The marriage is the legal part, but
yeah.
the rituals of the wedding were a lot more prevalent and a lot richer. So people were more open for ring warmings and hand fastings and unity ceremonies, even broom jumping and stuff like that, which brings not just a lot of engagement and opportunity to involve your guests,
Mm,
it actually brings a lot of connection
mm,
and also community elements to it without it being obviously religious, because as civil celebrants we are secular, so we
mm,
are non-religious, and people often misinterpret rituals and many ceremonies as being affiliated with religion, whereas it's more an expression of and an opportunity for an expression of emotion, but also connection.
mm.
And they're also those little moments where you have intentional action within a ceremony,
Yeah.
they are the triggers neurologically that help us form memories. So,
Wow, that's interesting.
yeah, yeah. It's one of my nerdy things is the neurological stuff. I actually
I
did
love
quite a lot
it.
of work with a lady who is in positive psychology, and it rubbed off.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And so tell me, so you mentioned, a few rituals, and
Mhm.
and I have, as a celebrant, I've done a ring warming, but I certainly have never done a hand fasting or a unity ceremony. And I think there'll be a lot of celebrants out there who include other elements in their ceremonies, but haven't done things like that either. I'd love to know a little bit more. Can you dive a bit deeper? Tell us about us, those three as a starting point. And what are
Yeah.
they? Where do they come from? Like, have they come from medieval times? Like, because it sounds a little bit, I don't know, spiritual, medieval, I don't know. Tell us about hand fasting, for example.
Oh, and it's funny you say, yeah, medieval and spiritual. I mean, they can be quite a spiritual moment within a ceremony, again, without it
Mm,
being religious.
yes.
I find that people kind of balk at the thought of spirituality often,
Mm.
and I sort of come at it from the emotional opportunity. So it's that expression of emotion, connection, but also it's that pivotal point that helps people be present and be in the moment. So with a hand fasting, for example, so the background and the heritage of that is Celtic, and it
Mm.
is what we now know. So it's the foundation, if you like, that we now know of tying the knot. So it literally was the physical act of tying
Ah,
the knot. So
yeah,
back in medieval and even before that, it actually goes back quite a long way in terms of the Celtic culture. Before they had rings, the actual action of tying a knot was pivotal in the expression and the physical emblem of a marriage. So it's kind of evolved
fascinating.
over time, and there's so many different ways you can do it, but oftentimes it involves the couple holding hands. Some sort of rope cord ribbon is draped over their hands with some meaningful words. Oftentimes we'll talk about the meaning of the colors that they've chosen, because each color has its own intrinsic meaning, particularly when it comes to
Ah,
commitment and marriage. And then when you get to the end of the binding, so to speak, either the couple will make a knot, or the celebrant, or even a member of their family or the bridal party will
ah,
finish it off, so that there is a physical knot. So it's a nice piece of theatre, but it's also
yes.
got a hell of a lot of meaning on top of that as well.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. It sounds like
Yeah.
a really beautiful, as you said, a really beautiful moment of connection within a ceremony. So, yeah. And tell us about the other ones. What are your other favorite rituals that you've kind of included or speaking to couples about to include?
Well, the ring warming's a really lovely one, and
Mm,
you've done that before. I know. I think a lot of celebrants tend to do that, and that's where the rings are passed around, usually in a box or a bag or something like that, passed around the guests, just so each guest has that moment with something that will come to symbolize the commitment that's been made on the day. So they get their little moment to have a bit of a reflection, if they want to make their own wish or blessing on the rings, that's their opportunity to do so. Oftentimes we tend to do that at the beginning, what we would call sort of that housekeeping waiting period, when you're waiting for usually the bridal party to arrive. So it's a great
mm,
way to engage the guests, but it's also a
mm,
nice way to bring some of the storytelling to life for marriage, because the rings haven't always been a part of the marriage ceremony, but the symbol of a circle has. So I usually talk about a bit of that history in terms of why the circle, and then how it's evolved over time to become the ring. And the ring is the visible reminder of the commitment that's being made. And when you have it on your finger, that has been made as well. But some of the other ones, I've
love
got one
that.
here actually. So that's a little sand ceremony vase from one of my weddings last year, um, and that's a version of a unity
Yeah.
ceremony. So sand blending, and we often do those when it's bringing together two families, for example. So they might have children from previous relationships,
Yeah.
or it might be a second marriage, and they want something physical beyond the rings and the paperwork to remind
Mm,
them of the day. But also, that's one of the ways that we can creatively incorporate things like the promises or the vows that they personally want to make to each other, or expressions that they want to make to each other before they take their legal vows. A lot
mm,
of people get really nervous, and don't want to speak publicly. So something
Mm.
like a unity ceremony gives them that opportunity to quietly talk to each other while doing an intentional
Doing
action.
something.
Yep.
Yeah.
That has a whole lot of meaning, and also then becomes a commemorative element of their ceremony itself.
I absolutely love that. And I love the, especially for people who may have been married before and have children, it's a great way to involve the kids in the ceremony as well, isn't it? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it is.
just beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating to do the research, and I know as part of kind of the study in Australia, that's a requirement for celebrants. People might not realise we study long and hard to become authorised to marry people in this country, which we
Mhm.
should. But you know, the history behind all those rituals, and even the ones that are standard in the ceremony these days, the I do's, the things like that, which not a lot of couples, when you start talking to them, realize they don't actually need to include some of these things if they don't want to. They can, it's optional. There's obviously the legal wording we need to say for them to be legally married, but there's so many other bits. The exchange of rings, even, right? So,
Yep.
the history behind those, whether you want to have it in there or not. And yeah, I love the history. It's really interesting. But look, for you, and you've seen it in two different worlds, the UK and now in Australia. What part of the ceremony do you love the most?
Oh boy.
It's hard. It's a hard
Uh,
one.
that is a really hard one, actually. I really love, well, there's a couple of moments. Firstly, particularly if the couple have chosen to arrive separately.
Mm,
So if one of the couples actually waiting at the front with me, which tends to be what a lot of my couples like to do, um, I love that moment of when they realize, oh, it's happening. So they haven't turned around yet. There hasn't been the first look. That anticipation mixed with a little bit of nerves. Um, I love just that opportunity to share that moment with them.
mm,
And then just that look of when their eyes first meet, when they are allowed to turn around, or they do permit themselves to turn around. That's wonderful. That's an absolute favorite of mine. The other one is, I love pronouncing. So I love when I can tell a couple that they're legally married. And you were saying, a lot of people don't realize there's things that they don't have to, they're not obligated to include. Um,
mm,
but also, people don't realize once they've said the legal vows, according to law in Australia, they are married. It's not the signing of the paperwork, it's saying those
mm,
words witnessed by a registered celebrant and two witnesses. They are then married. And that's the bit I love, that pronouncing bit, and seeing them react to that and realize that all of that stress, angst, the build up, whatever it's been, it's done. And they've managed to get through everything that's gone before. They've had those moments together and it's
mm.
official. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
actually given me goosebumps. I was thinking back to
me
one of my most
too.
recent ones. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's and it's almost, you see the visible relaxing of shoulders. It's like, oh, we've done this. We made it. Thank goodness.
Yeah, and it's funny, even with the most relaxed couples, like I've had couples, I had a couple recently, and they're like, "Oh, we're so laid back. We're really relaxed about this. We're not too worried about it." Da 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 da. And I always give tissues. I always hand out tissues in advance, just in case. I'm like, just in case. And both of them had emotional moments, and I said to them, take your time. We give little cues. That's probably one of the things couples don't realize, that your celebrants usually will give you some little cues when we see you're getting a bit overwhelmed and what have you. But people underestimate the emotional impact the day is going to have on them, and just some of those moments, the words, and what kind of emotions it triggers in them.
Mm,
um, so that's one of the things that I would also, and I also talk to my couples about. I'm like, just be prepared to feel things, and it's okay
yeah.
to feel things, because that's why you're doing it, because you love each other and you want to share the rest of your days together. So
Mm.
don't be surprised if you feel things, and go with it. That's always
Yeah,
a fun one,
totally.
isn't it?
Yeah. And just, I think, as you mentioned, the celebrant will be there to guide them and to support them through whatever comes up. And I think, one of the things I love to do is just to stop for a moment. I love reminding my couples that this isn't a performance. This is actually real life, and we're going to go with the flow here. So, especially when you're working with animals and kids, and we include all those beautiful people and animals that are special to them. Often you've got a dog ring bearer or part of the wedding party, and you've got to go with the flow, don't you? Because goodness knows what's going to happen. So yeah, I love that. I love all of that.
I love that. It's not a performance. I'm gonna
It's
steal
not
that
a
with pride.
performance. Yeah, 100%. But can you share one of your favorite couple stories with us where they've included one of your, because I'm assuming that you would suggest this now to your couples, that you've got
Yeah.
that such a beautiful knowledge of the historical meaning behind all these rituals. I'm sure many of your couples take you up on that.
Yeah, they do. It's surprising. Again, because even laid back people, and they're like, oh, we just want to get married, and then you start to sort of dig into it. And I'm quite an empathetic and intuitive person, and generally they're more romantic and more emotional than they are aware. So I
Mm.
tend to find little bits where I can encourage them to express that through the ceremony. So I had one of my favourite ceremonies from last year, Kenny and Lynn, both Irish people, gorgeous, and actually met in Australia. So
Oh,
one of the jokes was Lynn travelled pretty much around the world to meet a lad who literally lived up the road from her. Um, so, it was so much fun, and we could have so much fun with it. But because they were getting married here, their family is here in terms of their kids. Their extended family and friends couldn't all be with us on the day. So
mm.
it was something that, as we were sort of going through the process of planning, I became aware of, and I said, well, would you like to include some moments within the ceremony where we recognize your friends and family who are still abroad, so that you just have that moment of personal reflection, to recognize them in your hearts, and then we can get on with getting you married. And their piece was, they really wanted to have something that connected them back to Ireland. So we actually had a toast at the very beginning. Once Lynn had walked down the aisle, her sister came up and gave a toast on behalf of the groom's brother. His best friend
Oh.
actually poured for them Irish whiskey, and they took a sip of Irish whiskey. Hilariously, they both hate whiskey. So they had to sort of chew through a toast, which was brilliant. But we just had that little moment where I'd written for them an Irish toast, so that her sister could read that out, and they had that little moment of connection with home. And then to involve their kids, because they've got, I think it's 4, 6, and 9-year-old boys, and they wanted them involved in the ceremony. So I suggested to them that we actually do the hand fasting, because it's Celtic, and then because it meant that she could actually choose some colors that I could relate back to their heritage, but also weave
Yes.
in the story of love and commitment as well. So we had this amazing hand binding where the boys actually placed the ribbons. So each boy had a ribbon.
Oh.
It meant, so I talked about the color and what it meant and what it represented. So each boy had a part in the binding, and then I finished it off at the end to literally tie the knot for
Tie the
them.
knot. How
Yeah,
beautiful. I can
yeah, it was
only
fabulous.
imagine the fabulous photos from that as well. I'm picturing them chewing through their whiskey.
It was, oh, bless them. It was so funny. But it was a beautiful, beautiful moment, two beautiful moments. And like I said before, it just gave them that time to pause
Yes.
and think and reflect. Because the other thing, I don't know if you find it, couples don't realize how fast the ceremony goes, even though it's like
Yeah.
between, 20 minutes, half an hour, for example, which seems like a long time. But when you're in it, it's over like that. So
Yeah.
having those little moments of pause, that can also help trigger memory recall as well later on.
Yeah.
They're big things that I try to find for my couples.
I absolutely love what you've shared. It's amazing. Let me change tact and
Mhm.
ask you. Obviously, we're in 2024. There's a lot going on in the world at the moment, positive and negative. What are you seeing for your 2024 couples? Any trends that you're noticing that are, I suppose, whether they're coming up, emerging trends, or are here to stay? What are you seeing?
Oh, well, one of the big ones is a lot of couples are coming to me for something that's calm and relaxed. And it's one of the things that my
Mm,
couples always say is I create this atmosphere of calm. Um, and I personally, part of that is coming from, we're still on this sort of back end of the madness of what was COVID and all of the other things that are happening in the world that are completely unbelievable at the moment. Who
mm,
thought that the war would still be going on in Ukraine still? But that pressure of the last few years on top of the rising cost of living in this country in particular, I think it's really taking a toll, not just financially
mm,
on couples, but just emotionally and psychologically. So people just want something that's relaxed and calm, but
mm,
also something that authentically feels like them. So I'm getting a lot of requests for um, mini ceremonies that we can personalize and bring a little bit more of their person, their couple story into the ceremony itself.
mm,
But there's also this rising, which I love because it comes from my background in the UK, a rising request for involving their friends and family. So creating that moment of connection within the ceremony beyond just the couple, that's
mm.
also rising, which is fabulous because it was one of my surprises when we came back to Australia that people weren't wanting as much of that. So that's really starting to come through, which I think is a bit of a lovely uh, hangover from COVID that we are starting to look for those moments of connection. Um,
100%.
yeah, the other thing which I love, there's more colour this year. There is way more
Yes.
colour, and I love that. I say that I'm, wearing bright blue and I always wear fun earrings and red lipstick. I love color and starting
Mm.
to see that come through. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting for me.
Yeah, I was talking to a florist the other day, and they were saying exactly the same thing. I think what's the tone for the year? The peach,
Yeah,
yes, that
can't
Pantone
remember
color
the
of the
name of it.
year, and I love it. I love seeing the bright, the brightness, and I know. I was a bridesmaid 6 times back in the 90s, and color was in there. And I remember my sister having bright colored gerbras, and then that all went, we went really muted, didn't we? We've gone really natural. Now the
Yeah,
brightness is coming back. So let's see what that brings. It's so much
yeah.
fun. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sasha. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. And I just think it's so interesting to explore the world of rituals and personalized moments that you can add to your ceremony. But I just wanted to ask you one more thing, and that's how do couples find you? Where are you? Where are they going to see you find your style? Obviously, you're marrying people Gold Coast, Brisbane, and everything in between.
Yep.
So where can they find you?
So my website, as we all have, Ceremonies by Sasha, and it's Sasha with a C. I have to say that. It's Sasha with a C and Clark without an E. That's how I always introduce myself.
I love
um,
it.
So, yeah, all my information, including a little bit about me, is on my website and my packages. I'm also on Facebook and also Instagram, and super easy. It's Ceremonies by Sasha. So it's nice and easy to find
Fabulous.
me.
Excellent. And we will obviously tag you and have all your handles when this episode goes to air. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, I hope everyone's enjoyed that chat. I certainly learnt a thing or two. And yeah, I'm really grateful for having you on. Thanks, Sasha.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. And I was very pleased that we could just have this moment because I love talking about rituals. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
It's actually, the thing, I think we could all just talk weddings all day. My family is sick of hearing about weddings. So it's good to have other industry colleagues that are interested,
It really
So-
is. It really is.
Well, I will see you soon. We will see you soon on Just as Planned. Please, stay tuned. There are more episodes coming this season, and I can't wait to bring you some more fascinating speakers. So see you next time. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Just as Planned Weddings podcast. Please like and subscribe to let us know that you want more videos just like this one. And of course, please follow us on our socials at Just as Planned Wedding on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for more expert insights to help your wedding go just as planned.